Good evening, and welcome to the Candidates Forum for the Palo Alto Unified School District School Board of Education. The League of Women Voters of Palo Alto and the Council of PTAs of Palo Alto are sponsoring tonight's forum. I'm Ellen Forbes. I'm president of the League. I want to thank you for coming out this evening to show your interest in the education of our students. The League is a nonpartisan political organization whose mission is to engage citizens in active and informed participation in government. The League does not support or oppose candidates or parties. The League also studies issues, takes positions based on those issues, and advocates for those positions. This forum, funded by the League Education Fund through contributions from members and community donors, is devoted entirely to our voter service activity. We are most appreciative for the participation of our many co-sponsors. In alphabetical order, they are the AAUW, Avenidas, Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, Palo Alto Council of PTAs, and the Palo Alto Weekly and Palo Alto Online. This forum is being recorded by the Media Center and is being aired live on cable, Public Access Channel 28. It's also being streamed live. To find playback times, go to midpenmedia.org. That's the first step. Second step, under Local TV, go down to and select Local TV Schedule. And finally, in the search box, type in PAUSD. For more information on the elections, we recommend that you visit smartvoter.org. Our League website, which is lwvpaloalto.org. Please pick up a flyer over on the side table about the League presentations of the pros and cons of the ballot measures this year and the candidate forums, and also a fax for voters, who your representatives are at all levels of government. The candidates' campaign materials are on the tables outside of the boardroom. Please stay after the forum to meet and talk with the candidates personally. And now I'm pleased to turn the microphone over to our moderator for tonight's forum, Gloria Chen Hu from the San Jose Santa Clara League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm glad to be here. You know, this forum provides the opportunity for all of you here tonight, and as well as those listening and watching this elsewhere. We have so many media possibilities these days. It's your opportunity to hear from the 5 candidates who are running for the 2 seats on the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Trustees. I'd like to introduce them right now, and they drew lots earlier, and they're sitting in the order, and they are with us: Catherine Kristen Foster, Ken Dauber, Ajita Dahlman, 4, Terry Godfrey, and J. Blas Jacob Cabrera. Before we begin, I'd like to go over the format for our session. We are scheduled to be finished by 9 p.m., and to help keep us all on track, we have our timekeeper, Larry Lovechick. Larry, there you are, Larry. He will signal candidates with the yellow sign for 30 seconds. And most important, the red sign when the time is up. And I know you'll all be cooperating. If not, I'll just step in. The candidates have all received our ground rules, and there are also ground rules for the audience, and I'd like to quickly go over them with you. The audience, the questions to candidates must be written on cards provided by the League here at the forum. We have many volunteers who are distributing them. They're circulated by our volunteers from the League, and please indicate if the question is directed to a specific candidate. Secondly, I asked that there be no audience demonstration, clapping, etc. during the forum, especially anything that would be indicative of your feelings for or against any candidate. It's a good time to turn off all electronic devices. I hope I've done mine. And we do ask that no camera or video devices be used during the forum. And this is a good time now to think about turning off or silencing your telephones. Candidates have already been advised, and they're all here. We did not allow any stand-ins. We also ask that your responses should pertain to the question at hand, and I may interrupt you if, for some reason, I see you or hear you straying from the subject. I will also be enforcing time limits, as I said, and we've already seen those signs that will be shown. We ask that you not interrupt each other. We ask that, and I see you don't have any props, I believe, and that, as we noted earlier, the campaign materials are outside, and I don't see anybody with any buttons or campaign materials inside, so that's fine. The written questions will be collected throughout the forum. You'll have some time to put them together. I will ask, because I have trouble sometimes reading some of the questions, that you write as legibly as possible. It's for your benefit, so we can make sure that we ask the question you wanted, also for our volunteers who are looking at the questions and vetting them for you. This will allow us to cover as broad a range of topics as possible, and please avoid having those questions be, in fact, speeches, and they should not be partial to any particular candidate. Can I just see the volunteers, if they're around, with their hands up, and they have baskets for the cards, so please wave your hand if you need a card, or if you've got a card for them to pick up. I do want to acknowledge our question sorters and other volunteers. They are Valerie Stringer, Jean McDonald, Mary Alice Thornton, and Susan Usman. And I'm not listed here as the person who's been putting it all together, Trina Leverchek. So they have just been a great bunch of people who put this together. We'll begin with a 3-minute opening statement from each candidate. Candidates have drawn numbers and will speak in the order in which they're seated. Following the opening statements, each candidate will have an opportunity to ask one other candidate one question. And you're aware of this. The time limit for the question is 30 seconds, and the response time is limited to 1 minute. The questionnaire, I may allow a rebuttal for more than 1 minute. We'll then have the questions we have collected from the audience. So that will give you, while they're starting with the questions of each other, some time to be thinking about your own questions. Candidates will be called on in varying order for each question. So I'm going to sort of rotate you around. It'll be randomly done. And you'll have 1.5 minutes each to respond. I should also urge you, though, you don't have to take the whole 1.5 minutes. So,
good advice.
And we'll have then, we'll end with a closing statement from each candidate, and that's limited to 2 minutes. And we'll be doing your closing statements in reverse order. Okay. One final note, in the interest of time, and so that we can keep this a very nonpartisan environment, we ask that there be no applause or other demonstration of support or opposition to any candidate or their positions. And at the end of the forum, you'll all have an opportunity to cheer them all on with applause. So let's now begin with the opening statements, and we will start with Ms. Foster.
Thank you. Thank you to the League and the PTA Council. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. I have a particularly soft spot in my heart for the League of Women Voters, since my mom was a 30-year League member and has been to so many of these. I love communities that come together and support things like this. And my love for this community is part of what really inspired me to run for school board. I love the community, and I'm passionate about educational excellence for all students. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey that I took to get to this place now, because that will give you an idea not only of the skills and the experience that I would bring to the board, but also about the values that I would bring to the board. The journey started when I graduated from law school and took a job advocating for immigrant battered women, keeping them safe in their homes. And I still remember Maria Elena, who was unable to send her daughter to school because she couldn't find a safe place to sleep. After my time doing that work, my next step in the journey was working with a child advocacy organization where I helped work to keep kids safe, healthy, housed, well-educated, and well-fed in cities and towns across the country. The next step in my journey took me then to write legislation for local government, again, working to help make sure that that legislation was most protective of kids. And beyond that, took me to California, where my husband and I started our family. We're looking for a town where we could send our 2 boys to school, to the public schools that we knew were so great in Palo Alto. So I began working for the Children's Defense Fund and other clients, and helping kids and their moms, people like Jenny, who was desperate to find subsidized child care for her daughter. We helped get legislation in place that would preserve funding for programs that serve kids like her daughter. And I worked with organizations like the Hewlett Foundation and the Gates Foundation to help them with their education programs, to learn from what they did, to help make sure that their programs were better so that more young people could get a good education in America no matter where they went to school and no matter where they lived. I then turned to work more locally with the Peninsula College Fund. At the Peninsula College Fund, I was the executive director and helped low-income, first-generation college students finish college, including students here in Palo Alto. I expanded the program to serve the kids here where we hadn't served them before. But it was really important to me that the kids here had an opportunity that other kids in other places would have. So that brings me to the next step, which I hope will be the school board, where I would love to maximize the potential of every student, where I want to take the skills and the experience that I built up over all of these years and use them at this incredible moment of opportunity and change. I thank you. Look forward to talking to you some more.
Thank you. Now we'll hear the opening statement from Mr. Dauber.
Good evening. My name is Ken Dauber. First, thanks to the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum and to my fellow candidates for participating. My children have attended elementary, middle, and high school here in Palo Alto, and one thing I've learned from having 5 children is that every child is different, and that our schools work best when they meet every child where they are and enable them to meet their individual potential. I went to public schools myself. I have a PhD in sociology, and I spent 6 years teaching sociology to college students. I've been a software engineer at Google for the last 7 years, and I've also spent more than a decade consulting to organizations like the Gates Foundation and the U.S. Department of Education on how to use data to improve education. Following the tragedies that our district experienced in 2009, I wanted to get involved in the community response. I was concerned at that time as a gun parent about the effect of academic stress on our students. In response to that, I helped to found, build, and lead a broad and collaborative coalition here in Palo Alto that took one piece of the recommendations in our community's Project Safety Net plan for creating a supportive school environment and worked to get those recommendations implemented, including recommendations like finals before winter break, limits on homework, coordinated test and project scheduling, improved guidance counseling, curricular alignment, and other issues. As more people from across Palo Alto began to work together on this, we also started to work on other issues like civil rights, bullying, college readiness, special education, supporting low-income children. Now, when I say a broad and collaborative coalition, I mean that it includes a broad cross-section of parents, students, teachers, and community members from across the city. We've worked together in an effort to put students first. And we've had some real successes. It's a record that I'm proud of. We've helped to move forward many of the goals of that part of the Project Safety Net plan for a supportive school environment. I feel that the experience of helping to move forward these goals has left me very well prepared to serve on the school board. For example, in the course of working on these issues, I've attended almost every board meeting for the past several years, and I understand how the board operates, how it sets goals, how it makes decisions, and what the role and responsibility of a board member is. In this campaign, I'm making some specific proposals for things that I hope to accomplish on the board after the election. All of these goals will, I hope, put students first. And they include continuing to reduce academic stress and improve social and emotional support, increasing consistency in teaching and curriculum, opening a 13th elementary school promptly, implementing foreign language instruction in all of our elementary schools, cooperating with the federal government on civil rights, improving relations with our special ed community, and reducing unnecessary expenses such as legal fees and public relations, and putting those dollars back into the classroom where they belong. And there's lots of other issues that I'm sure we'll talk about tonight, and I hope I'll earn your vote in November.
Thank you. I'm now hear from Ms. Brown.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the League. I want to thank all of you for coming and participating in this democratic process, and I want to thank all my colleague candidates for traveling this journey together. I'm running for the Palo Alto School District because I believe that every kid has the opportunity to be a change maker. And I believe we have everything in our school district to make that happen. I believe we have the best students, the best teachers, the best administrators, parent community, and the most creative community in the world. But I don't think that we're using these assets fully to achieve our goal. There's three things that need to happen in order for us to make sure that all our kids reach their social, their emotional, and their academic potential. The first thing, we need to build a learning institution. We need to embrace innovation. We need to evaluate what works, measure it, and scale it consistently. The second thing is we need to collaborate towards a shared vision of success. We need to make sure that we're aligning the budget, paying for activities that will allow us to achieve the vision. And third, we need to continuously connect with our amazing community of innovators within our geographic boundaries and outside of our geographic boundaries to keep innovating. I was born and raised in Mexico. And 20 years ago, my husband and I decided to make Palo Alto our home. We fell in love with this community. We fell in love with its creative spirit. I was trained as an economist. I have a master's in economics from the University of London, a master's in international policy studies from Stanford University. And for the past 10 years, I've been focused on increasing the academic achievement of all the children in the region. I've been fortunate enough, first as the Director of Innovation for the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, and for the past 7 years, I've been leading the Silicon Valley Community Foundation's investment in education. That means I'm a grant maker, and I work with 54 different school districts and superintendents, assuring that we're investing in those key programs that are the key lever points for student success, including teacher professional development, student programming, education technology, and creating environments for all the kids to succeed. For the past couple of years, I've been incredibly busy in terms of helping school districts implement the Common Core state standards. And together with my colleagues from the Gates Foundation, Stewart, Bechtel, and Hewlett, we've created a national network of funders interested in implementing Common Core, so we're able to scale best practices. I want to make sure that all this learning and innovation that I see through my work, I bring it here to the school district that I care most about, because this is where my kids are, Palo Alto. And I hope to count with your vote to do just that.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey.
I echo my friends on the dais here. Thanks to all for coming, and thanks for the organizers. I plan to give you a little background on myself so you have some context when you go to ask questions. I was born in Panama. My family was in the canal zone from when the canal was built. And when I was 5, my parents decided to move us to California so I could go to school in the States. So I took full advantage of the California public schools, went all the way through to get a BS in math at UC Irvine and an MBA in finance at UCLA. So I'm a California public school girl from age 5 to age, 24. I started my professional career in finance, and I worked in finance and human resources and venture capital, including, I'll give you some job titles to give you some breadth of what that work was like. I was the finance director for Intel Europe. So lived and worked in Europe. We had a $300 million budget and 1,500 employees. I was an HR director for a 2,000-person organization, including having a team of statisticians and industrial and organizational psychologists who did all the data analytics on people. So when you have a 100,000-person organization, you need to understand what's happening in your organization, and so my team did that. I also worked at the Stanford Graduate School of Business as the director of finance and strategic planning. Along the way, I had some kids, and they wanted to go to school. And they started school here in Palo Alto at Escondido Elementary School, and I decided that where my spare time, what little there was of it, was going to be spent helping those schools. So when I worked full-time, I was Escondido PTA president. When I transitioned to working part-time, I was PTA council president. And in those years, unfortunately, as was mentioned earlier by Ken, we had a suicide contagion that resulted in Project Safety Net. And I jumped right in and wanted to be part of a collaborative organization across the city helping youth well-being and trying to prevent teen suicide. From the 22 strategies the Project Safety Net founders, of which I am one, determined, I picked developmental assets as my the ball to pick up and carry forward, and I still do that today. Most recently, I was PI board president. I was recruited to PI not because I'm good at fundraising or making posters or doing marketing, but because of my leadership skills. It's a 100-person volunteer organization raising $5 million every year for our kids and our schools, and what was needed was someone who had the leadership skills to be able to get those goals in place, get metrics in place, and lead the organization to what is a big number, because as you know, at the end of every year we write a check and give it all away and start over again. And so that's a big challenge. So for me, I believe that the mix of skills of my financial background and my deep love of this city and this community are a good mix for the school board. So I lay that out for you to give you the opportunity to ask questions and just give you some context. And of course, I'll want your vote in November.
Thank you. Last opening statement from Mr. Cabrera.
Hi, my name's Blas Jacob Cabrera. I go by Jay, and I was born here in Stanford Hospital. I grew up in Palo Alto. I went to Nixon Elementary School. I went to JLS Middle School, and I graduated from Gunn High School in 1998. From there, I went to UC Santa Cruz, University of California, Santa Cruz, and I studied environmental studies and biology, and I really enjoyed that. I really focused on sustainability, very big into any type of green programs. And in my senior year of UC Santa Cruz, I ran for the #2 position within the student government. I got elected to that, so it was the internal vice chair. And that was the first time that it had gotten elected to a government position. And I was also the chair of the student committee on committees. And so that particular position, I know it sounds a little silly, but it oversaw every single student appointment to the hundreds of administrative and faculty committees on the campus. So you really got a bird's eye view of how an entire educational institution functioned. And then additionally, I was on and served on quite a few different committees, which I will not go into detail on for you. I'm really a supporter in initiating and bringing our governance structures of our communities into the 21st century and utilizing technology for decision making in our communities. I feel that a lot of our government structures, regardless on what level, are based on 200-year-old democratic systems, and there are so many amazing technologies we now have at our fingertips to bring into that. So the key word is interactivity. I'm dedicated to putting every single decision, every single issue online, allowing the community to interact and vote on issues, to ensure that there is a direct conduit to my candidacy as a board member if I was elected, and building that community network and interactive collaboration with the community. From there, I'm also a big proponent of rethinking the educational context of our 21st century economy in the context of computer skills, and specifically computer coding, and considering the aspect of making computer coding and computer programming a basic skill that is learned throughout public education as one of many, many issues that we could, as a community, prioritize. And lastly, I'll just say that, as a member of our community, I am, and I just mentioned, after UC Santa Cruz, I boomerang back, living with my parents here, here in my community. And, there's no question that when people think of a school board representative, they might think a parent. And I'm here to just bring the idea of a potential alternative option of having a different perspective on the school board and just bringing out my ideas. So I'm excited about having that diversity here for you to listen to.
Thank you, and everyone was just perfectly on time. What an amazing slate of wonderful candidates you have before you, highly qualified, obviously all very passionate about being here. We've given each of them an opportunity to ask another candidate a question. And can I just get a quick look? Do each of you have a question to ask of another? Okay. But what I'd like to do is not necessarily go in the order that you've all spoken, so I'm just going to mess it around, okay? So for the first question, let's see now. I've got my little grid here. Candidate 4, which would be Ms. Godfrey. You may ask the first question.
Thank you. My question is related to, as I'm sure you're aware, we have a new superintendent, Dr. McGee, and Dr. McGee spends a good deal of time talking about evaluation and the importance of evaluation, which is music to my ears and the ears of many. So Barron Park has a new maker studio. So my question is for Catherine, actually, because I know you have some experience in evaluation. How do you evaluate something like Maker Studio and the outcomes, learning outcomes around that, and how we decide what to do with that going forward?
And just a reminder, 1 minute.
That's a great question, because how we evaluate is going to be the way that we bring this district forward and the way that we scale any of the innovations that we have. So what I would do with something like that is start off with what were our initial goals, come together and decide who it was who came up with the idea of the makerspace, what are our goals, figure out what we want to know, and how we're going to use the information that we get. The next step would be to figure out what's your data collection plan, what can you do with the resources that we have, and what can we do in the time frame that we have. Collect the information, and the key thing is to make sure that we have usability in our data. You only want to collect what you're going to use. You need to have an action plan for using it. So for something like Maker Studio, I would absolutely think about what do we want our kids to learn? How do we want our kids to interact with one another? What are all the different things that we're hoping to accomplish through that Maker Studio? And then figure out how we can come up with measures that are very carefully tailored to what the goals are, so we can figure out how we can get usable, actionable information about sustaining that or scaling it.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal?
No.
Okay. The next question will go to Ms. Donna. You may ask your question.
Thank you. And this question is for Ken. Ken, you've been advocating continuously about the need for the 13th elementary. And we've seen enrollment numbers taper off in the past couple of years. Would you still advocate for the 13th elementary?
Yes, I would. I know that some people take the fact that we've had moderate growth for the last several years as an indication that we don't need to open a 13th elementary school, but in fact we've needed to open a 13th elementary school for a long time now. Over the last 20 years, the average size of an elementary school in Palo Alto has gone up by a third, yet we've only opened one new elementary school in Barron Park in 1998. Let's talk for a minute about what's at stake here. Educational research, and I think our experience shows that the optimum size for an elementary school is between 300 and 400 students. Only 2 of our elementary schools are that size. In 2008, we set aside our size policy, which set a limit of 450 students for elementary schools because we couldn't sustain it anymore. Our schools now are too crowded. Our playgrounds are not of the optimum size for teachers to pay attention. It's time to open a 13th elementary school.
Thank you. Is there a better, Ms. Donnelly?
Can you talk to us a little bit about the costs?
He does not have a chance to, you can rebut, but you've got another minute, that's it, okay. The next question actually is for you, Mr. Dauber, to ask another candidate.
So this is a question for Gina Dolma. All of the candidates, including both you and I, have expressed enthusiasm for the Common Core. But what we haven't talked about in very much detail is how it should be implemented, how long it will take for a successful transition, what some of the pitfalls are. What strategies do you have to ensure that the Common Core is going to work in Palo Alto?
So as I said in my opening statement, I have the opportunity of leading the Silicon Valley Common Core Initiative, and I'm working with 27 school districts to do just that. And I think that first we need to make sure that we're focusing on the vision. What do we want to achieve with Common Core? And we need to make sure that at every level of our school district we're owning that vision, because we're going to need to own the work that comes with that vision at the teacher level, at the site level, at the district level. Once we have the vision and we have the buy-in, we need to make sure that we are investing in exactly the things that we know will make this transition successful. And it's not a short-term transition, it's a 3 to 5 year transition. And that's teacher professional development, education technology, student programming, and formative assessments, which would require another 30 seconds to explain.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal, Mr. Donner?
I would just add that we also need to be paying attention in the transition to the Common Core that we are addressing the achievement gap in a way that continues to work for students. One of the points that Camille Townsend has made, which I think is valid, is that the transition in assessments is meaning that we're going to have trouble with tracking the baseline of students across the transition to Common Core, and so I think that's an issue actually that we need to keep an eye on.
Thank you. Next question, opportunity for you, Mr. Cabrera, to ask your question of another candidate.
Just to clarify, is it one candidate or all the candidates?
My understanding, it can, is it just to one candidate?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, this question will be for Terry. There's so many different opportunities and options for building interactive structures to have the community be more involved with the board. What's one or two that you might be interested in implementing?
Thanks for the question, Jay. So I agree with you that the way we gather input when we make decisions now is not optimal. So the standard procedure is you come to a board meeting and you wait for the agenda item and you speak to it. So that only lends itself to people who have time to do that. And sometimes you miss out on other points of view. So we have in the past, a PTA council put out surveys for parents and community members to have input, but there's also things like clickers and other ways where you can have online, like voting, straw poll voting, that sort of thing, which I think for us would probably be really useful as a way to get a broader base of input instead of counting on people to come stand in this room and do it, or sometimes just email to the board members. So I think there are definitely a lot of electronic ways we can do that, and then there's the old-fashioned surveys as well.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal, Mr. Cabrera?
No, that's...
Okay. The last question is for you, Ms. Foster, to another candidate.
So this is a question for Gina. Counseling at Gunn and Pally has been a subject of interest and controversy in our district. So I'm curious to hear from you about specific changes in counseling at Pally and Gunn that you've agreed with or disagreed with. Tell us what changes you'd like to see made in the current counseling programs at the two high schools.
So let me first explain the difference between both schools. In Pali, we have the advisory system, which means that there's an adult that is associate with a student, and it's the purview of that adult to make sure that that student is feeling engaged, and that student is completing that student is on a right track. But basically, it's a relationship between the advisor and that specific student. I'm sorry, in Gunn, you don't have that advisory system. It has been proven through surveys that the system in Pali provides a much better environment for students than the Pali one. And my point has always been, let's learn from what works and make sure that we're scaling it to affect all students.
Thank you. Ms. Foster, is there any rebuttal?
I, I'm very interested in some of the changes that actually have been made at Pali and at Gunn, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how some of the smaller incremental changes that have happened at Gunn over this past year are going to play out. This, I guess, goes to the question of evaluation, where we now have more counselors, counselor of the day, more communication, things like that, and I'm very curious about what the evaluation plan is going to be and what that will show about the impacts on student health and well-being and student success. There's also been some smaller changes at Pali that I'm interested in seeing how they play out. As far as I'm concerned, the key thing is making sure that we have a clear sense of what we're trying to achieve at both schools, and that we have a clear plan for research and learning from the students themselves about what works well for them and how it impacts their health, well-being, and achievement.
Thank you. Okay, now each of the candidates had an opportunity to ask a question of one of their, I guess, their challengers or their other candidates. We'll now turn to the questions we're collecting from you in the audience, and we'll start with the first question, and I'm going to have you respond pretty much in the reverse order. So we'll start at this end and go on that way. Future questions will jump around a bit more, but we'll start this way. And a question for each of you, and you will have up to a minute and a half to respond. What do you see as the role of the board versus the role of the superintendent? And I think the question is, what is the line between board role versus superintendent? And we'll start with you, Mr. Cabrera.
Yeah, the role of the board is specifically to set, policies and broad-based visions for the district, and the role of the superintendent is specifically to implement those procedures and implement the plan that is broadly set by the board. Getting into more detail, the board is certainly going to be directly involved in gathering public input and in ensuring that the public's point of view is represented within the ideas of the planning and implementation, and then the superintendent is responsible for educating the board on what is going on inside within the administration of the Palo Alto Unified School District, because it's very difficult to get that information otherwise. From there, one of the most important roles of the board obviously is to evaluate and hire and fire the superintendent, and so that is extremely important. I think that was just a brief overview. I'm sure other candidates will get into more details. But I feel like one thing that the board isn't is the board is not a top-down, whatever the board says is implemented at any individual school. The board just doesn't have that power. The board is one decision maker within a community of decision makers that has to work together collaboratively to build decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrera. Same question to Ms. Godfrey.
Thank you. Well, Jay, can't say I disagree with you. That sounds like what I would think the difference between a board and superintendent is as well. I might say it as the board is here to represent the community. We're an elected body, and we are, the schools are a community asset, so our job is to represent the community and take care of that community asset. We set policy, strategy, and set tone. We manage the resources, which would be make decisions around budget and resources like that. And we manage, as you said, the superintendent. So the relationship between the board and the superintendent is the board's the boss. The superintendent takes those actions and goes and implements them. I think sometimes in the community, because there's one superintendent and 5 board members, people sometimes defer to the superintendent because it's easier and there's only one of him. But in fact, there's 5 board members, and that's just a little messier to deal with. So that's all I would add to Jay's description.
Thank you. Ms. Donnelly.
And you're going to keep getting incremental description as you move along, but I think that the main difference is one of oversight. The board has oversight in terms of administrative oversight, judicial oversight. It has oversight over the budget. And the board gets to ask questions in terms of what the superintendent is doing in achieving the vision that has been set. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, are you perhaps will add to this information?
I would focus on the role of the board in linking the work of the school district to the community's desires and values around education. And it does that primarily through two things. First, setting goals so that it's clear what this organization should be trying to achieve. And then second, producing accountability. That is, setting the metrics and expectations against which the community can judge whether or not this school district is really achieving the goals that it has set for the district through its elected board members. And I think a good superintendent really welcomes that. A good superintendent wants clear goals, and a good superintendent wants accountability because he or she wants to demonstrate that, that he really is executing against the goals that the board has set. In order to do that, we need a board that is independent of the superintendent and that exercises the kind of oversight that Gina talked about. We don't need a board that is acting essentially as senior staff members of the organization, because there are plenty of senior staff members who are well trained in education. We need a board that is exercising oversight with clear goals and clear metrics against the desires that the community has expressed for its schools.
Same question, Ms. Foster.
There's very little to add once four people go through a question like that. But I think it's a very important one, and I think that it's one that is important for the community to have clarity on, and the way that the accountability works. The school district is designed to serve the students and be accountable to the community. And one of the ways in which that happens is accountability flowing up through the school board, which are the elected members, where you really have the ability to directly influence as a community member who is going to be leading and setting overall direction. I think it's also important to note that while the goal that there needs to be clear communication between the board and the superintendent on the goals, the strategic plan in many ways is their joint work. And it's very important for them to have that same, to each have ownership of that. And for the school board members to be able to really push and inquire of the superintendent when they need information from the superintendent to request of staff in order to find out how we're doing with respect to our goals.
Thank you. We don't have the superintendent here to his or her response to that. Okay, the next question we're going to ask it, and I'll tell you what the question is. Actually, Ms. Foster mentioned the strategic plan. So the question is, do you disagree with anything in the strategic plan? And the order in which you'll answer this question will be first Ms. Dolma, then Ms. Foster, then Mr. Cabrero, Ms. Dauber, and then Ms. Godfrey. Okay? So the question is, do you disagree with anything in the strategic plan? And we'll start with Ms. Dolma.
Well, first of all, I think that it's the board worked very hard to have a very good strategic plan, but there are several things that I disagree with in the strategic plan, and I think the main one is we state very clearly in the strategic plan that 85% of our kids will be proficient in 3 years. You cannot have a strategic plan that doesn't have as a objective to serve 100% of our kids. And I think we should be measured on that. The second thing is that we just went through a local control accountability plan. And I believe that that deserved an update of the strategic plan. I think that there's a little lost opportunity before aligning those two documents. And I wish that we would have gone through that effort. If I'm elected into the board, that is one of the first things that I would be looking at.
Thank you. Same question to Ms. Foster.
I was delighted to see the strategic plan, and I was also glad to see that the superintendent pruned it down a bit so we could really have some focused goals as a district. Because when we can focus in on what's most important, we're most likely to achieve some success. I very much agree with many of the goals that are in the strategic plan, where I think that it may need a little bit of addition would be around metrics that are in the plan and timelines for execution. There's a tremendous amount, and it's a very ambitious plan, but it is not entirely clear exactly how that's going to be executed. Like Gina, I feel that it's important that we stress that every student can reach his or her full potential and that we have the highest expectation of all of our students. I also think, though, that it's important to be realistic and to make sure that we set achievable stretch goals for ourselves as a district. I would love it if our stretch goal was 100%. And it's important to think about how we can get there, and extremely important to think about how we can make sure that we reach every single one of our students.
Thank you. Mr. Cabrera.
Yeah, the strategic plan is a great document. It's very informative. Honestly, I need to spend more time reviewing it and getting involved in it. Overall, the plan is about 20 pages, I believe, but then there's an additional 100 pages of analytics and metrics that is attached to it. You can see it's quite a thick document, double-sided. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but I certainly agree that it's essential to understand the metrics and how we're going to evaluate the strategic plan. And then, my big question is, great that we have a strategic plan. Do we want to reevaluate it and update it as a community when it's just been created? Possibly not, but really go and dive into detail on the implementation of the plan and understand exactly how it's going to be implemented and the different components of it, and potentially even understand more prioritization within the plan, because it's very dense, and trying to pull certain things out of it that the community sees as a top priority.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber?
My core with the strategic plan is less its contents, although I think it does lack metrics, than the role that it has really played in guiding the work of the school district. What I think is more important than a sort of lofty set of goals is a set of annual goals that say exactly what we're going to do, that matter to students, and that we actually get done. I think Barbara Klausner, who I see sitting in the room, had this complaint about their strategic plan, that it's possible to overinvest in planning and underinvest in execution. And I think that's one of the things that we've done in this area. So, there's things like a 13th elementary school, foreign languages in elementary school, completing the work of our homework committee, making progress against the concrete issues that I talked about with our Project Safety Net plan. If we have a strategic plan that doesn't get us to those goals, then the plan isn't really doing the work that it needs to do for us. So I would focus less on creation of large planning documents and more on getting right the tactical work of setting achievable goals on an annual basis and getting them done. I think that will produce the kinds of results that parents and students in the community can really benefit from.
Thank you. And Ms. Godfrey?
Thank you. So my thinking is similar to my friends on the dais here. For me, the strategic plan has nothing in it that I necessarily disagree with, but it's pretty middle of the fairway. It doesn't have a lot of stretch in it, and it was the product of having lots of community input and lots of folks working on it together. So it gets a little bit watered down in that process sometimes. So I feel like we have the opportunity with the new superintendent to really take some stretch goals around innovation and benchmarking with other districts and the kinds of things that we've talked about in the past but never quite made it into our strategic plan or into our annual goals. So for me, that's really, I see this opportunity to relook at that, and we saw Dr. McGee hit the ground running with a new set of annual goals within just one or two board meetings of having been here. So not only sort of stretching beyond what's in there now, but even back to sort of the tactical, as mentioned before, some of the metrics we have are metrics that measure effort versus metrics that measure output. So a rethink on that would be, I think, important for us, and certainly the work environments that I've come from really have solidified in my mind that overall goals, that people can see how they align with those goals, and those goals for a long-term big vision that really tie to what you're doing every day really helps keep employees engaged, and I think keeps students engaged.
Thank you. The strategic plan, of course, is something that was done previously. Now let's talk about what you would do in terms of our budget and priorities. So the question is, what are your top 3 budget priorities? And we'll do the responses in this order. We'll start with, actually with Ms. Godfrey, Mr. Cabrera, Ms. Dauber, then Ms. Foster, and then we'll end with Ms. Dolma. Okay? So, what are your top 3 priorities? And we'll start with Ms. Godfrey.
And that was my top 3 budget priorities?
Top 3 budget priorities, yes.
Okay, so so looking at budgets and trying to figure out priorities is part of my core skill set and something that I'm comfortable doing. And I feel like for us, we have 1,600 employees in the district. We spend $185 million a year. 85% of that is on personnel, which should not be a surprise to you. Diving into what is in there would be my first priority, to figure out if we have the right resources in the right place doing the right job. Our resources aren't quite as tight as they have been in the last 5 years. Things are loosening up and we're starting to add things back. So, so first priority would be to figure out what we're spending where, and is it the right place so we don't have gaps and overlaps. And then from there, I think we have some strategic things that we've wanted to do recently that we haven't done. One would be foreign language in the elementary schools. I was on that committee back in 2008. It got shot down because it cost $1 million, which seemed like we could not do it then. That seems like it's something we could do now and the community would support. Another would be adding some resources to support teachers. We ask our teachers to do more and more and more with special ed inclusion in the classroom and asking them to do better communication with the families. I think it behooves us to figure out what they need from a professional development standpoint and perhaps other resources to help them do the things we expect them to do. So that's my top 3 things I would do. 2 of them are budget priorities, and one of them is figuring out what's in the budget.
Thank you. Same question, top 3 budget priorities to Mr. Cabrera.
Thank you. My top priority would definitely be to see the new budget. Online right now, there's a, it's like a keynote press. It's basically very limited 10 budget items. I've gotten access to something that's a little bit more detailed that has about 20 budget items per se. But I really want to see a more detailed budget. It's currently not available on the website, but the good news is that they said they're going to be putting it on the website very soon. So soon we'll have a napkin, they call it, with about maybe a couple pages, and eventually there'll be a long, thick document about 1 inch thick that'll be online that we can really comb through and see the details. As far as top priorities, I feel like we should reconsider the context of the a 10% minimal reserves. The state requires 3%. Consider bringing that down to 5%. Currently, we have almost $25 million of reserves, and in addition to that, we have $60 million of bond measure money that hasn't been budgeted yet either. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities of what we can do with that money. Combing through the administrative costs and seeing how we can downsize that to bring that back into the classrooms and to the teachers. How can we reduce class sizes? How can we do more research on different programs like coding and other top priorities for the community. And lastly, I think that really Cubberley could be an amazing investment in upgrading Cubberley for 21st century educational purposes.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber, same question.
Dauber.
Yeah, I don't know. Was it Dauber or Dalma?
Dauber. Sorry.
So I have 3 budget priorities I would focus on. First, eliminating expenses of the district that really don't have anything to do with serving student needs, that is, putting students first. And I would put at the top of that list legal fees for outside counsel, where we've seen a ballooning of those fees, in part due to the really unnecessary fight that that the board has chosen to have with the Office for Civil Rights, and also for, I think, litigating with special education families, where we would do better to be offering them support. Public relations is another area where I think we should cut, and we've not only have an internal public relations person, but we've actually spent recently a lot of money on outside public relations. The second is better budgeting. We have a 2% projection on our property tax increases year over year our actual experience is usually substantially higher than that. This past year it was 6.5%, and the consequence of that is that we put a lot of money into our reserves that really ought to be part of our budgeting process, and we should be making a conscious decision whether we want to use those funds for education as opposed to just defaulting to put them back into the general fund. And the third is some real priorities where we can put some money against things that work for kids, like foreign languages in elementary schools, as I've been talking about, and reopening a 13th elementary school, which is extremely high impact.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Foster.
In our $185 million budget, it often looks like we have a lot of money sloshing around, and while there is money there and there are reserves, we're looking right now toward having increased numbers of students with no increased revenues that go along with those students. We're also looking at our pension obligations being increased 19% as a result of state priorities and state legislative changes and a number of other cost shifts to our school district. So I want to put that out there in context for what some of these priorities are. I think that my first priority would be around evaluation. I believe that we need to have more focus and staffing in our evaluation side of the house so that we can do all of the other kinds of teaching and learning that we want to do and make sure that it's the best that it can be. Along with that, and this kind of goes hand in hand with it, is teacher professional development. We want to make sure that the professional development that we are doing is the best and most impactful. I'd like to see more around alignment across classes. I'd like to see more around writing instruction and advancing innovation. And last, again, these are all interrelated to one another. I would absolutely like to see some investment in innovation that would take our schools really far into the 21st century. That would include foreign language instruction in 6th grade and then into elementary school. It would include more engaging interdisciplinary curriculum across the schools.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Dahl.
So, as all of you know, the state adopted a new funding formula, and this funding formula obligates each school district to develop a local control accountability plan. The magic of these plans is that forces school districts to align exactly what expenditures are being made to achieve the goals, right? And our school district went through the process, finished their own LCAP. The first thing that I would make sure is to update the next season and take from January to April to evaluate it and make sure again that our budgeting is going exactly to activities that will help us achieve our goal. The second thing is I coincide with you, Catherine. I think that we need to invest strongly in evaluation. We need to know what works and we need to scale what does and close what does not. The third thing is, again, I think Common Core implementation is a huge opportunity for our children if we do it right. That means meaningful professional development. That means student programming, investing in education technology, investing in instructional material, and making sure that that our kids have everything to succeed within this environment. And lastly, we need a facilities plan. We need to be planning 5-10 years ahead. We obviously need a 13th elementary, but we also should be thinking, what are we going to do with Cubberley? Taking into account that it's expected that we're going to be around 16,000 students by 2025.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears a little bit, although it has something to do with budget. And the question is, one candidate mentioned a district-wide foreign language program. How would you fund such a program, district-wide foreign language program? What would you cut in order to implement this program? And we'll let me give you the order. We'll start with Mr. Cabrera, Mr. Dauber, Ms. Dalma, Ms. Godfrey, and then Ms. Foster. So, again, the question, one candidate mentioned a district-wide foreign language program. How would you fund this program, and what would you cut in order to implement this program? Mr. Cabrera.
Yeah, so the two primary places where I would cut from the budget, and obviously I want to see the budget more, to go into more detail. One is the reserves, so potentially reduce the reserves down to 5% from 10%, and of course currently we're at almost 15%. Possibly make it double what the state requires, which would be mid kind of 6%. But more importantly, I feel like we need community members. We're gonna have a 1-inch thick document that goes over, the $200 million as well as the $600 million from the bond. And so I would encourage, the community to split that up, $5 million per person. Let's really comb through this budget and see where we can, nitpick. I feel like there is always excessive spending going towards administrative oversight. How can we get that money back into the community? If, as a community, we do want to implement a foreign language program, at all schools, that is certainly a great idea, and something that if people want to do that, we should find a way to make it happen in the context of our budget restrictions, and I feel that there are ways of doing that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Ken Barber.
Well, the first thing we need to recognize is why do we want foreign languages in elementary schools, and it's because the research shows that kids who start foreign languages early do better in languages through life, and they also do better in literacy generally. So that's why we want it, and we should keep our eye on that ball. And then the question is, how do we pay for it? And there were two questions. One is, what would I cut? I've already mentioned a couple of things, really unnecessary legal fees, going to outside law firms, public relations. I would look across our budget for expenses that aren't directly tied to things that benefit students, because we really want a student-first budgeting policy. We also have, we're running a strong budget surplus through property tax revenues. We're by default investing a lot of that in a general fund reserve. I wouldn't cut our board policy about reserves at below its 10% current level, but I certainly wouldn't continue to invest in reserves because we are not making good projections about what property tax revenues are. And when I say we're not making good projections, I mean we're making projections that are unreasonably conservative and are leaving us in a situation where we are not doing things for kids because we are pretending at the beginning of the budgeting cycle that we have less money than we actually know that we're going to have. And that's just perverse. We should give ourselves all of the financial and fiscal tools that we have to make decisions and make those decisions consciously. And I think when we do that, we're going to decide that we want something that is as impactful and important as foreign languages.
Thank you. Ms. Downs, same question.
So I agree strongly in a universal foreign language policy. I do also think that we need to plan to make it happen. I'm the result of a bilingual education, and it not only I'm hoping that it helped me in literacy, but it does make you a global citizen. And we've seen efforts of that in our school district where it's not only being bilingual but bicultural, and I want to make sure that that is clear. So so we need to I'll go back to my answer to the previous question. We need to make sure that we're evaluating things. There's a lot of programs that we've had that have started. They have not shown any impact in student achievement. First, we need to know about it. And we need to have the courage to close them and ensure that those savings are going for something that we know works, which is a second language. We visited the superintendent in the candidates night, and it is obvious that there's been a very conservative policy towards reserves. So we need to make sure that is used for some things that we know are valuable for our kids' well-being.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey?
As I mentioned in one of the prior questions, I worked on the FLES, Foreign Language in the Elementary School Task Force, in 2008. And at that time, we took the proposal to the board and it was rejected. The financial circumstances were not good. So also since then, I mentioned that I was PI board president, and part of what PI donors have asked for many years when we go out to figure out what donors want to fund, and we find the place what donors want to fund and what the school district can do, foreign language comes up over and over again. So if I looked at what I might want to do with funding FLES, I would start with, back in 2008, it was going to cost $1.1 million to do FLES in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades across all the elementary schools. Unfortunately, the teachers haven't gotten many raises since then, so it's probably not much more. But you could start by using some reserves to start the program, and then as you build momentum, maybe in your donor base, we know that we have donors who want to fund the elementary schools, and you can fund either elementary, higher, or middle, you have that choice. We could use some donor funds for that. as that grows, you use less of what's in the reserves. And then as a whole budgeting process, as we're looking at things that we want to defund, that frees up some funding as well. So there's those three different sources. The mix between those three sources changes over time to be less reserves and more other funding. But I'm pretty sure we can do that. I thought we could do it then. Unfortunately, the board did not.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Foster, same question.
I share my colleagues' strong commitment to foreign language instruction earlier and believe that we absolutely can do it. I've heard again and again when talking to people in this community that they want it, and I know from all of my work in education policy over the years, this is something that, for all the reasons that have been stated, is good for us to do. Our budget should follow our priorities as a community, and it should follow our values, and therefore we need to make this work if this is something that we are committed to. The costs can be funded in some of the ways that I heard here before. I believe that we can take a little bit off of our reserves. I think that in terms of PI funding, I would be only interested in kind of annual, kind of pay-go funding for the kinds of expenses that are in a much more annual sense as opposed to a long-term investment. But I do think that PI is one of many avenues that could be used. Other places that I would look to for cuts include, again, programs that aren't returning the results that we want for our kids. So evaluation, I know I'm a bit of a broken record on this one, but I think that evaluation is going to lead us to more effective use of our dollars. I also think that we should take a hard look at what we do in terms of sustainability in our schools and see if there's any cost savings that we can realize in the way we use energy and resources within our schools. I will leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. I think you actually had a few minutes, but are you done? Thank you. All right, we'll move away from the budget for a little bit toward a broad question, and this is probably more of a gut kind of a thing. And I'm going to tell you the order we'll do it this time, and we'll start with you, Mr. Dauber. Second, we'll do Ms. Godfrey, then Ms. Foster, then Mr. Cabrera, and then Ms. Dalma. And the question is, what's one of the top things that makes life hard for high schoolers in Palo Alto? There are probably very many, but what, in your estimation, is the top what's one of the top things that makes it hard for high schoolers in Palo Alto? And what should we do, try to do about it? And we'll start with you, Mr. Dalma.
When we ask high schoolers this question, what they talk about is stress. Our high schoolers feel an enormous amount, I think, many of them, stress in terms of their workloads, in terms of competition, in terms of expectations that they take on an enormous number, actually, of challenging classes in order to demonstrate their fortitude and their ambition. For example, when students at Pali were most recently asked about homework, 84% of them said that they found that that their biggest stressor in test and project stacking. 74%. Similar results at Gun. What we know is, so we have a list of things to work on: homework, test and project stacking, connections to adults at school. We have a plan around this. I've talked about it, the Project Safety Net, supportive school environments. I've worked on that plan. A lot of community members have worked on that plan. The right thing to do is to keep executing on the plan. So, for example, we have a homework policy that talks about time guidelines and talks about the role of homework. What we don't have is metrics around whether that plan is being implemented and whether it's having the effect that we want it to for our students. So what we really need to do is to take the things that we already know and the plan that we already have and continue to actually work on that.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey, your thoughts on this question?
Thanks. So similarly, some of the things that Ken just mentioned with project and test stacking, expectations, taking many classes based on those expectations sometimes leads to sleep deprivation. And on top of sleep deprivation, one of the things we hear from kids is horizontal consistency between teachers. So, one kid's got a teacher that teaches the same course in a different way than another kid, and that adds a lot of stress to them. So there is a lot around that. Sometimes that leads to academic integrity issues, cheating. And I know in my household, my child happens to be writing a story on that right now, and the kids that she has interviewed, not only is the cheating from the pressure, but then they feel terribly guilty about the cheating, which is adding stress on top of the pressure. So the whole thing is just a vicious cycle. One of the things that I think is important for us is giving the teachers the time and space to do the kinds of planning they need to do horizontally consistent teaching so that they're teaching similar in the classes, and give them a chance to talk to each other and the time and space it takes to plan to take care of project stacking and test stacking. All those kinds of things that they don't have the time to slow down and talk about really affect our kids, and that would be a place that I would want to start. And similarly, the adult connections that are present on campus, Gun did the dot, I love that thing too.
Thank you. You can finish your sentence if you like.
Oh, Gun did this dot exercise a couple of years ago where they looked at all the students and the adults put dots next to their name to figure out if there was any kids that didn't have dots.
Just end the sentence, because I was getting shy.
I could go on all day, but I won't.
Okay. Ms. Foster, your thoughts on hard life and high schoolers in Palo Alto?
Well, I've got a junior at Pally who's sitting home right now and who's probably going to be up really late tonight working on his homework. So stress is something that I know every day from my experience and from the experience of many students who I've spoken to as part of the work that I do in general and as part of the work that I'm doing as a candidate. I've been talking to a lot of students who are currently in our high schools and those who have recently graduated. And the stress comes from a number of different sources, and it's important for us to parse out what some of them are. Some of them have to do with volume of work and the confusion by, I believe we have fabulous teachers in our district, but I think sometimes that we confuse challenge and rigor with volume. And volume is not necessarily the same as challenge and rigor. I think our kids also suffer from a lack of sleep. That's kind of a cause and an effect of their stress. There's also a lack of engagement sometimes. You know, many of us have read the book about doing school or have heard people talk about that. When kids are doing work that they don't find meaningful or purposeful in their life, where they're either in the classroom or at home doing homework, they are going to be more stressed. Finding avenues for more engagement for them and making sure that the curriculum that they are following is engaging and purposeful for them is really helpful. There's also a lack of clarity on whose success we're talking about. A lot of our kids do not feel that they have the ability to chart their own destiny and define their own success, which leads to their stress.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Cabrera, same question.
Yeah, we had a forum at Gunn High School, and I talked about 15 students and just interviewed them. Just walking around, and they definitely said that there was huge academic pressure and huge stress put on them, and that was a resounding issue. There's so many details of that. I feel like the first thing I would say is just we need to have space to actually address this as a community. That it's not enough just to be an agenda item. You need a whole forum to just address that over time, because it's not going to go away. It's not going to change. Being a Gunn High School, stressed out, dealing with tests, one issue that comes up obviously is that you have a variety of classes, and you get homework from all of them, and there's dips, and it's like a roller coaster. But every once in a while, you just have this huge workload from all of the classes, and none of the other classes pay attention to what the workload is from the other classes, and so you just get this overwhelming stress. So it seems like, why not give students a get out of jail free card that they can use once a year, something like that to help them with stress. Other issues is building a reward system to reward students for where they're at. It's so important to acknowledge that our system truly does create a one-size-fits-all in many ways, in the concepts of get your A's, your B's, and your report card. And how do we make students feel like they are an individual and that the system is working within their current parameters? So I think that's really important. The other thing I'll mention right before I stop is that the parent relationship and involving parents in the education of how they are bringing stress upon their kids is essential.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrera. Ms. Bowman, your comments?
So a couple of weeks ago, there was a report from the U.S. News and World Report that both our high schools had were in the top 60 high schools in the nation. And, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of parents, and I think we have to, because I agree with what my colleagues have spoken about, but I think we need to have really a community conversation of what we believe success is. Success is not that all our kids go to Harvard. Success is not that all our kids go to Stanford. Success is that each and every one of our kids really achieves their passion and they reach their social, emotional, academic potential. So we need to make sure that we're looking at all the policies that are limiting their ability to truly find what they find relevant in school to what they want to do, to what drives their passion. It's not only, the stress is not only the parents, the stress is the peer group, the stress is the community, the stress is our value system. We need to make sure that we're having these community conversations. I want creative thinkers. I want innovators. I want people that are excited and curious of learning. I don't want every one of our kids to get to Harvard.
Thank you. I'm bewildered by the high school dilemmas that our kids today are facing. I don't have children, so I don't feel it, but I've certainly read enough about it. We have a very different question now, and the question is this, and this is sort of a general question about you. Many of your campaign materials were the same. Can you name one thing you would do in office that you feel or think would not be true of the other five? And I guess, what is that one quality or one skill or one thing that you would do that you perhaps feel the others might not be doing or wouldn't do? And we'll do it in this order. Actually, we'll start with you, Ms. Dalma. Then we'll go to Mr. Cabrera, Ms. Godfrey, Mr. Dauber, and Ms. Foster. So, again, campaign materials be the same. What can you name one thing you would do in office that you think is not true of the other candidate? And I guess it really comes to that question, what would you bring uniquely and do uniquely? Ms. Dalma.
So first I want to thank my fellow candidates, specifically Terry and Catherine, that have spent so much time working at PI, working at PTA. I think that those organizations in our school district are a huge, huge asset. I don't bring those hours of volunteering to the school district. What I bring to the school district is thousands and thousands of hours evaluating programs that work towards student achievement and systems where those programs work, school districts where those programs work. So the first thing that I would do differently is cross El Camino. I would cross El Camino. I would talk to the thought leaders that are leading education in our nation, in our world, and talk to them about innovation and bring it back home. I would talk to other school districts in our region that are doing phenomenal work with kids of color and socioeconomically disadvantaged, and I would bring it back home so we close the achievement gap. We know how to do it. We can make it happen. I would continuously connect again with knowledge in different countries and make sure that we are pushing the boundaries. We cannot rest in our laurels as a school district. I'm not happy enough that we're at the top 60. We need to make sure that 100% of our kids are reaching their social, emotional, and academic potential.
Thank you. Mr. Cabrera?
Yeah, the first thing you'll notice about my campaign materials is that they don't exactly exist. One is that I'm running as an individual. I don't have a lot of funds and money to buy. I'm also very much so into sustainability, and wanting people to look at the web, which is jcan.us/schoolboard. And in the context of some of the issues, if you do look at the website, which is my primary campaign material, is you'll see that there's two main pictures. One is really push for interactivity, wanting to see technology in online forums to be used directly on the community to be able to click and vote and make comments on actual proposals going in front of the board. The second is coding, and I feel in talking with in learning about what the leaders of our tech industry in this area in Silicon Valley are saying, and they are saying that we need to educate our students from early on with the skills for the 21st century economy, and that is learning how to code. I have really not had a job in my life where I wasn't working with engineers in some level. Like, you're giving feedback to engineers. They want to know how the apps are working. They want to know how the website can be improved. And so the more you know about what's happening on the back end of the engineers, the better. And so there's no way that as a school board we can just implement that, but we can start the process as being a cutting-edge, technologically driven school district to do research on what the feasibility of that is.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey, same question.
Yes, thank you. So as Gina mentioned, I have spent a lot of time and hours doing PTA and PI kinds of things. I make no apology for that. But the unique skill set that I bring and what I would expect to do is, back to our very first question, the difference between the board and the superintendent. We have fine educators here and fine education leaders. Our job is to set policy, strategy, tone, manage the resources. So for me, my large-scale course skills are around finance, organizational development, with a subspecialty in turning around underperforming teams. Now, that is not an issue here, but if it ever comes up, I'm prepared. So looking at our whole organization, where our resources are, if they're in the right place, if they're doing the right thing, if our most important and skilled resources, which is the teachers, have the right support they need, that's the start. Taking our centralized versus decentralized decision-making process and actually putting some structure around that, what decisions can be made centrally versus being made at the district level versus at the site levels. As long as the outcomes have been decided on, some decisions can be made at the site level. They can have blue chairs versus purple chairs. That's fine. So I think those large structural kinds of things that take that kind of thinking from a organizational design perspective and a finance perspective is what I bring. The hours of PTA and PI, those were helpful since I know my way to all the different schools and what they do, but that's not really my core skill.
Thank you. Mr. Dahlgren.
Well, the best evidence about what kind of board member I would be, I think, is the many, many hours I've spent in this room working on policy and bringing initiatives to the board backed with data and evidence and testimony from the students and parents who it would affect. I am really committed as a board member to getting things done, and to getting things done that demonstrably work for kids, because we've looked at the data and the evidence and the research around them. So, for example, on homework, I served on the district's homework committee after advocating that we should start it, and I worked closely with district staff, Dr. Charles Young, for example, to take this sometimes contentious subject and to bring to it a wealth of academic evidence and brain science that really led to a consensus on that committee around time guidelines and the purpose of homework for the first time in the district. So what I've demonstrated as a citizen and as a participant in policy discussions stretching back over years now is a willingness and an ability and a commitment to get real things done, to do that in a way that's informed by data and evidence, and to do it in a way that's collaborative and relies on outreach to all of the stakeholders that are involved in that decision.
Thank you. Ms. Foster, your comments?
So the question is interesting because it's got two parts. One is what I would uniquely bring, and what is what I would uniquely do. In terms of what I would uniquely bring, it is the combination of decades of work in policy, years and years of time spent working not only at the policy level, but actually at the program level, where the rubber hits the road in terms of how kids achieve and succeed in school. Running an education nonprofit, working side by side with community organizers in Philadelphia and Denver and Chicago and New Jersey, all trying to change their schools and make them better. That kind of on-the-ground experience combined with policy experience, combined with evaluation experience over 2 decades is something that I can bring to the school board and that I think would be incredibly valuable to the school board. That is, of course, combined with being a volunteer, so I know what it's like uniquely in our, so I know what it's like for students in our schools. But in terms of what I would do that is a little bit different is I am talking quite a bit about middle schools. What I'm hearing in our community is that middle schools are a place where we need to do more work on our vision, on what the kids are going to learn, how we're going to teach foreign language, how we're going to have smaller learning communities, how we're going to
turn the curve on the achievement gap, and how we're going to create students who are inspired learners in high school and then beyond, because middle school is where things can sometimes fall apart. Thank you. Appreciate that. The next question is takes you in a whole other direction, and we'll answer in this order. We'll start with Ms. Godfrey, then Ms. Dalma, Mr. Cabrera, Ms. Foster, and then Mr. Dollar. And the question is, given the OCR lawsuit on the bullying of a special ed student, what plans do you have to support special ed students in the district? Let me read that one more time. Given the OCR lawsuit on the bullying of a special ed student, what plans do you have to support special ed students in the district? And I've lost track. Oh, and Ms. Foster, we said we would start with you.
No, I think, which is fine, but I think you said Godfrey. Which one?
I'm sorry?
That's right, either one's fine.
Who starts, Godfrey or Foster? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped a line. There I am. Ms. Godfrey, yes, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Either way, it's fine. I know you'd let me answer eventually. Okay, so the OCR lawsuit is something we spent a lot of time talking about. It has taken an emotional toll on our community. We have now finally a bullying policy that we can use as a guidepost for how we deal with this sort of a situation. As I mentioned, it was a painful way to get here, and I think our district has learned a lot from that process. I think going forward, what's important is that when you have a policy that's in place, that it be very accessible to the folks who need to use it, and that's parents and administrators and teachers, and that it be well understood, and it's clear, it has clear timelines, and it has a way to rebuild trust with families, that when they've got an issue with their special ed kids and some bullying, that there's a clear path to resolution. I can't imagine anything more heartbreaking than having your special ed kid be part of a situation like this. Any kid in a bullying situation is painful, but then have it compounded by not knowing what can be done to help and who can help. So in my mind, the way forward on that is to use the resources that we have, the channels that we have for communication, and do some parent ed around this is what it is, this is how you access it, this is how we protect these kids, and that we do that going forward as a team and as a community to help rebuild the trust.
Thank you. Ms. Dahlman.
So I think the first thing that I would do to build that trust is actually take a couple of steps back from the board's resolution against the OCR, and really establish a partnership with OCR and make sure that from here moving forward we are working to make sure that we are providing a learning environment for all our children. They're all our children, both the one that bullied as well as the bullied. We need to make sure that we're providing the best learning environment for both, and we're nurturing both. The second thing is we need to keep learning. We have a bullying policy. We need to make sure that we understand if it works by measuring its effectiveness, and then making sure that it's applied consistently. That has been the single most important, I think, issue with our school district, is this consistency issue. And the third thing is I would really look at other school districts and see what they're doing in terms of their bullying policy. But not only that, how can we best serve all students, specifically those that have special needs, to make sure that they're achieving their full potential.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Cabrera.
Thank you. I mean, there's no way to address the severity and importance of this issue in a few minutes, and it's just so essential to empower the staff and the community to be able to address this and other future issues, including our bullying policy. I feel like some of the key aspects is transparency, ensuring that everything that the board does is completely transparent and completely open to the public. The public can be involved in the processes, specifically around these types of issues and other conflicts that happen. Also, I want to state, just in terms of working with minorities and special ed needs, it's so important to have accessible, like you're talking about, like accessible solutions and resources. I myself was diagnosed with dyslexia, which is a type of special education need, and making sure that there's resources for that. And when there's a stigma attached to it in the way that it's approached in the high schools and in the elementary schools, it's very difficult to get started many times. And so trying to reduce that stigma and reduce the issues that come with that so that it can be talked about more open. And I feel like what has happened in our community, well, really the entire country, with the anti-bullying movement is an amazing wave that we as a community should ride to implement all these policies that are attached to that.
Thank you. Ms. Foster?
Bullying and discrimination is absolutely unacceptable under any circumstances and has absolutely no place in our schools. It's my belief as a parent, as an attorney, as so many other things, and from 20 years of work in social justice, that we need to ensure that our schools are places where every single student feels safe, feels protected, and can learn. It's absolutely even more tragic when bullying takes place against a student with special needs. We now have a bullying policy in place that, as my colleagues have said, needs to be implemented, known widely throughout the district, owned, shared, reminded. Every student, every parent, every teacher needs to be reminded about that policy. We need to make sure that it works as best as it can, and we need to touch base with the families. We need to reach back to kids who have been bullied and make sure that they still feel safe. I also think that it's important to bear in mind that the services that we provide to our special ed students are services that can really aid all of our students and create the environment that is best for the special ed student is often one that creates a more nurturing environment for every student. So we need to listen. We need to make sure that that special ed parents have the whole range of needs that they are interested, that their kids deserve met. And I think that last, it's very important for us to work cooperatively with the Office of Civil Rights, whose role in great part is to provide technical assistance and support to the districts in protecting all kids.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber, your comments.
Well, the first thing that we should do is to repeal the resolution that the school board passed criticizing the Office for Civil Rights. One of the actions that the resolution authorizes is to engage in legal efforts to overturn the finding that we're talking about. That is the finding that the district violated federal civil rights law in failing to protect the student from bullying and harassment. So we cannot get on the right path on bullying and harassment while we are at the same time engaged in an act of denial around the bullying that has actually happened. The board needs to send a clear message to the organization that our schools are accountable to our kids and to our parents and to the law, and that's just the right thing to do. The school board set us on the wrong path with that resolution. The first thing we should do is, and that I would certainly do, is to set us on the right path. Second, as I urged at the time, and many of us have urged since, we need to put into place accountability around how we are dealing with incidents of bullying and parent complaints of discrimination and harassment. What was clear from the OCR case is that while we had procedures that mandated that reporting happened and so forth, those were not actually being implemented and followed uniformly in our schools. And until we get accountability around that at the level of implementation and not just around policy, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. So I would say two things. We need to put ourselves on the right path, and we need to put systems in place around accountability.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll do it actually the order that you're sitting, starting with Ms. Foster. The question is, do you feel there is a gun-poly divide? And if so, how would you describe it, and how would you resolve it?
Wow.
A little political question here, huh?
The fact that the question is asked is something of an indicator that there is some divide. We are a unified school district, which is something that we need to keep in the forefront of our mind. We perform best as a school district when we are unified and when we have shared aspirations and goals, and when no student feels like how either what they receive, how well they do, and what they can achieve is based on the school that they go to. I think that there's some healthy rivalry that'll go on between football teams, and then there's some other issues that might be things that we need to address more closely. For example, we need to make sure that we have shared outcomes and with respect to the counseling programs at the two schools, that we have shared outcomes and opportunities at the two high schools with respect to course offerings. And I think that it's extremely important that we think about how each school can learn from the other school to scale what works and to spread what works in each one of those schools.
Thank you. And Mr. Darby.
Well, I think Catherine's right that having a healthy rivalry between schools at the level of the students is positive. What we don't want is a situation in which we believe at the level of the school district and school district staff and board that significant differences between the two schools that reflect actual differences in the quality of services or education are acceptable, because they're just not. And I think one of the negative consequences of site-based control, and there's certainly positive consequences, but this idea that every school determines its own fate, has been this idea that we don't even have to ask the question about what difference it makes. So Catherine mentioned counseling at the two high schools. That's an issue that I have been very concerned about. We've had 20 years of having two different models in our two high schools. Very rarely have we asked in the district whether that was resulting in service differences. When I and others brought forth evidence that there were in fact significant service differences, it took a lot of work and a lot of energy to convince people that this was an important issue and that it wasn't good enough simply to say that these two schools are different, so they have different models. Our first obligation is to the students, and students in our district deserve the best of what the district has to offer, no matter what school they're in, what neighborhood they live in. And that's just a firm commitment that we need to be able to make as a district. So it's fine to have football rivalry. It's not fine to have rivalry at the level of what we're providing to students.
Thank you, Ms. Dolma.
So I think you're going to find a lot of consistency in our answers. Yesterday I was having a conversation with a teacher at Pali, and she's teaching one of the AP courses. And basically, her response was, you cannot make both high schools the same, because we have different talents as teachers and we have different passions. And to Ken's point, we want to make sure that at the end of the day, students have the opportunities to choose their own passions. If there's a specific AP program in French in Gun that doesn't exist in Pali, the answer from this specific teacher would have been, why doesn't the student transfer to Pali? I don't believe that's the appropriate answer or the appropriate approach. We need to make sure that we are truly providing our kids an equal opportunity, an equal chance for an excellent education, and the opportunities to have different resources around. We have a completely different program in journalism. Let me go to something more a class more instructional in journalism in Pali than we have at Gun. Let's learn from Pali and let's make sure that we transfer it to Gun. Let's assure that all our kids have the chance to succeed under equal circumstances.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey.
As Gina said, there is some agreement on this. As a unified district, we would expect to have standards for their outcomes and access to education to be the same at both schools. Because there's 2,000 kids at each school and they have different interests, there's 50 clubs, and the 50 clubs are different. There are different programs that are strengths at different schools. Some would say the Pali journalism program is pretty good, and some would say the gun robotics program is pretty good. The football rivalry in the past seems to have favored Pali, and I actually think it's been nice that the district has tried to downplay that, because I think when you have differences, highlighting those differences in a way that humiliates one school or the other isn't productive, and it isn't student-centered. So we don't want to send them off to the Stanford Stadium to have a football game where the guys wearing red don't do well and go home humiliated and don't like the experience. But having the kinds of differences that grow organically and add spice to life, help kids find their passion, seems fine to me, as long as we have the shared outcomes, the shared access, and have a vision for the places we want them to be consistent.
Mr. Cabrera, same question.
Yeah, this is a particular question where being a gun graduate could be problematic in the context of parents with children at Pali. But I think we're on the same page that the most important thing is having equal metrics for evaluating both the schools so that there's equality in grading them, right? As far as implementing all the different types of issues that need to be changed in one school or another, it's going to have to be a collaborative process, and we have to prove to each school why and how to do that and how to implement it. And I think one of the most important things is to have equal resources and supportive resources as needed for the school to ensure that they're able to implement those programs. From there, I think that it's extremely healthy to have, it's important to have healthy competition. And specifically, you could also add in academic competition. There's so many different ways that academic achievement can be rewarded, both for teachers and for students, and to utilize that to benefit the community as a whole. The only other thing I'll mention is, there is the question that comes up very often, how much autonomy do we want different schools to have in different locations? And this is related to that, and I feel that the other question that needs to be asked is, do we want to change the current structure of autonomy and the decision-making processes? And that particular question is very unclear in terms of what the community and what people are talking about it, because it's always put in the perspective of, autonomy and whether they should have it.
Thank you. We are unfortunately running out of time, so we've covered a lot of territory, a lot of different things, and yet there are probably another 6 or 7 cards we will not have time to get to. So we've got one final question that will go to all of you, and I think it's a good summary question. And I'm going to just arbitrarily make a decision, because we're running late on time. We limit it to 1 minute, because I know you can all respond in a minute to this question. And the question is, what would you say is the district's greatest strengths and its greatest weakness? And for this wrap-up question, we'll do it in this order. Mr. Dabo first. Mr. Cabrera second, Ms. Godfrey third, Ms. Dalma, then Ms. Jeffrey. Did I get everybody? 1, 2, 3.
Godfrey?
Dalma, Cabrera, I'm sorry, Foster, Dalma, then Godfrey.
Wait, hold on. Can you say it? Give me one again. Let me sure I've got my numbers right.
Dalma,
Cabrera, Foster, Dalma,
Alma, and Godfrey.
Okay, thank you.
Like Simon.
We all passed. That was great.
It's like Simon says.
I'm sure you're just getting more time for the question to think about it, okay.
We're stalling.
Greatest strengths and greatest weakness, 1 minute, please. Mr. Dauber.
I think our greatest strength as a district is our teachers. I have found during the campaign and also in all the work that I've done in the district over the past years that we have a lot of extremely innovative teachers who are really working hard to take that innovation and to really benefit students. So for example, I'm thinking of a computer science teacher at Gunn who is interested in building computer science into drama and into carpentry and woodshop and so forth. I mean, just really interesting ideas. What we lack is a way to take those ideas and to really help those innovative teachers get the resources that they need in order to do them, to reach out to the connections outside of the district that would be able to help them out. As Jana was talking about, our connections to Stanford and Foothill and so forth are really weak. And a way to take those innovations then and lift them up and propagate them across the district.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that quick time, but we just want to get as many of these out. Mr. Cabrera, 1 minute.
I agree that our students are one of our most amazing strengths. Our teachers. And then to add to that our students' achievement is unparalleled in many ways. I mean, we have some of the most amazing students here, and the achievement and ability to be one of the best schools in the nation is amazing. One aspect that's important to note that comes with that is the funding. We do have amazing funds that come from property taxes and other locations that we need to make sure are used properly, and that is an important role for the board. Weaknesses, I feel that in ensuring that there's more interactivity with the board, and so that the community's viewpoint is reflected in the board is essential. I feel that we need to be addressing, when I talk to students, they want more real life skills, that are incorporated not just in classes but also outside of class, and how they can get them. Everything from taxes to job hunting to dealing with renting cars, etc. And then from there, obviously the assessments, really evaluating and figuring out how we can improve our assessment systems.
Thank you. Ms. Foster.
I think our greatest asset is our students. I'm thinking yesterday I was at a campaign event, and the daughter of one of the women there was just sketching with a pen in her hand and making the most exquisite drawing I had ever seen on one of my flyers. And I was thinking about the talents ranging from art to coding to writing to math. We have incredible students, and we also have students who are incredibly giving to one another and respectful to one another. And I really appreciate very much the kinds of students that we have in our district. I think our greatest weakness as a district is that we are so good. And there's a saying that sometimes the biggest obstacle to being great is being good. And it creates a little bit less urgency, I think, sometimes, a little bit less impetus to innovate than we otherwise might. So I believe that it also, at the same time, creates a certain amount of stress and pressure on being such world changers for every single one of our students that if they feel that they haven't cured cancer by senior year, that they must be a failure.
Ms. Donlin.
So so I'm not just going to say that the school district has one strength. I'm going to go for this school district has amazing students. If you've never been to a ropes presentation in Connections at JLS, you need to do it. You need to do it because it is an unbelievable experience and a very humbling one. I wish I could be doing half of that at double the age. The second thing is teachers. We have teachers here that inspire our students in a way that I will never be able to thank enough, and they've inspired my kids. In terms of, and another asset, our amazing creative community. We were at the open house the other day. The art teacher didn't know how to upload all the images of the art pieces that kids have done. A parent said, don't worry about it, I'm coming tomorrow to your office. Now there's a full website, a whole interactive website. Anyway, in terms of challenges, we need to assure that all our kids have a consistent experience throughout K-12 system.
Thank you. Well, we've really come now for time for the closing statements. Ms. Coffey, I'm sorry. So focus on the
Numbering.
A minute, yes.
Okay, I'll take a minute. So when I walked in tonight, there's some, behind Sarah back there, there's some boards that have a lot of writing on them with ideas about how to meet the goals. And I thought, damn, we have great personnel in this district. That, if you read what's on those boards back there, you can see that we have people in this district who care about kids every day and are thinking about them every day. What is not so great about our district is that we don't have a great systemic way to make that the center of what we do all the time. We get tripped up on a few things on centralized versus decentralized decision making, how to get community input, how to respond to the community, how to be completely transparent so that we don't, trip over our own feet, and that's unfortunate. We can fix that; those are fixable structural things. What we can't go get someplace else is the personnel that it takes to do the kind of work that's happened back there. That they come together for our kids all the time, and they just bring it. And our kids come home and they love their teachers.
Thank you. Was that okay? Now we can do our 2-minute calls. No. I apologize. I get lost a little bit sometimes in trying to watch the time and questions in order.
Sure.
So, closing statements, 2 minutes, and we are going to do the reverse of what we did for the opening. So that means, Mr. Cabrera, we'll start with you.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. It's been an awesome experience. And I feel like the number one issue that we didn't have enough time to really address is, the stress levels for our students, how we can support our students in their, psychological well-being as a community. And I feel that, what we need to address not only just how it is in our community, but also our society on a whole is extremely stressful. We put huge amount of pressure on individuals, and it relates directly to students. And so there's no way I can talk about it all, but we need to address that even more. From there, I want to mention in the budget, one of the reasons why I feel like the reserves should be reduced is because never in the history, as far as back they could tell us at the superintendent's office, has the reserves been less than 10%. I mean, we've never ever had to dip in them, even with the recession and everything. So we have these funds that really should be utilized as a nonprofit organization. They shouldn't just be sitting there. They should be going towards student needs. From there, the last thing I'll say is just, for me, my background, or currently what I'm doing now, is I work with a nonprofit that I helped start, and one of our biggest projects that we do currently is about $30,000 a year, so it's small, so volunteer, is it's called Digital Storytellers, and it teaches at-risk youth in Oakland and Richmond poetry skills, and working with them to they record all the poetry and the slam poetry, and then do digital editing skills in the classroom. So it's just one of the activities that I'm involved with, primarily on the back end. Helping with the grants, helping with the finances. So I don't really go over to the classroom very much in Oakland, Richmond, because I'm mainly based over here. But I'll just end with that, and really appreciate being here and being heard as a candidate, and hope that people will look at all the candidates and consider what's best for the future of our school district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Godfrey.
Thanks, Jay. As Jay said, thank you for coming and spending your Tuesday evening with us, and thanks to my friends here on the dais. I want to just reiterate a few things that I said earlier, so when you walk away from this, you have the summary in your mind. I've been bringing it for the kids for a decade now, on top of my work and on top of raising my family and shepherding my parents through the end of their lives, and I expect to continue to do that. My passion is longstanding and deep. I bring a set of skills that a 1,600-person organization and $185 million budget probably would benefit from my finance and organizational skills, and I expect to put those to use as soon as I end up sitting in this seat, perhaps. And the things that I would think I want to do immediately are other things that I've mentioned, but let me just lay them out here. The first one, when we talked about understanding where the people are and if they have the support they need to do the kinds of things we want them to do, horizontal consistency and professional development, being able to do Common Core curriculum right, all those kinds of things. Just make sure we understand where all those people are and those dollars are, and how we can optimize for what's best for our students. We mentioned FLES, and I think initiating FLES and initiating sort of a benchmarking project that looks at all the different resources we've all talked about across the street, other districts, ways to bring in best practices and scale them, and then the two more structural things around decentralized versus centralized decision making. Figure out the model. There are models that work. We need a model that works, that's consistent and has some clarity. And then the last one would be figure out how to get youth voice and community voice into the process. Board meetings that stretch late into the night are not conducive for getting community input. People can't come at 1 o'clock in the morning and talk, so we need to fix our board meetings, which I'm happy to do, but also have a more systemic way of getting community input and voice of the youth into the process, so that we're making decisions that truly reflect our community and benefit our youth.
Thank you. Ms. Dahlman.
So again, I want to thank the League. I want to thank all of you for staying here with us. From very early on, my parents engraved in me and my siblings that education was the single most important asset for any human being, and that this asset was not only for individual achievement, but it was truly for what you could do for your community, for your world. Coming from a family of immigrants, it's truly the only thing you can take with you wherever you go. So we hold that value tight. And that's the type of education that we want to see for all our students. We want to make sure that they feel themselves as change makers. We want to make sure that they're engaged, that they're curious, that they find relevancy in what they're learning. I will never forget when my daughter came in from 3rd grade, and she was holding a cube filled with dirt. Her fingernails were incredibly dirty, and she was wearing no shoes. She said that the teacher had said that's okay. And she came and she needed to estimate how many worms were in that cube of dirt. Up to this day, and my daughter is now 13, she still wants to estimate how many worms are in our compost bin. That's the type of learning that we can make happen in every opportunity and for all our kids. But we need to make sure that we're learning from experiences like this and scaling them. We need to make sure that we're offering opportunities for our teachers to share so they can even improve this lesson. And we need to make sure that we truly are connecting intentionally across El Camino, around the Hill, and to other thought leaders to make sure that we're innovating, not resting on our laurels, and creating the best educational experience for all our children. We can do this. We're the most creative community in the world, and I hope to have your vote in order to achieve this.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn.
Thank you for coming, and thanks to my fellow candidates. These are really stimulating and interesting events for us. I hope they are for you as well. I want to do two things. I can see that. I want to do two things. First of all, I want to remind you about what I have done in our district over the past several years, which is to bring a level of commitment and collaboration and coalition building across parents and teachers and community members to get some concrete things done that are good for kids in our district. Working on homework policy, supporting pre-break finals that reduce stress, supporting college readiness for all of our students, working on project and test stacking. All of these issues I've worked on because they matter to kids, because they're simple things oftentimes that we can get done, and that will make our kids' lives better at school. And I think that's a really important mission, and that's why I've been here in this room many, many times, along with many parents and other community members. And I want to bring that level of commitment to the school board. And I also want to offer you some specific commitments, because I want to get some things done, and after the election I want to be able to say that's what people in this community want to get done as well. So to finish the job on our homework policy with some metrics, to finally open a 13th elementary school, to have foreign languages in all of our elementary schools, to put the district on the right course on civil rights, to work with the city to resolve the Cubberley issue so that we retain that asset for our community and foster it rather than let it deteriorate, to get consistency across teachers and courses for our students. Those are the kinds of concrete commitments that I'm making to you. I would like your vote in November to work on getting them done on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster.
Thank you, and thank you again to my colleagues. As you all heard tonight, I'm running for school board because I am truly passionate about educational excellence, and I want to maximize the potential of every single student in our school district. For more than 20 years, I've worked for kids. So when we talk about the achievement gap, I think about Priscilla and Raul from the Peninsula College Fund and how proud I was that they were the first in their families to attend college. And I want to see that kind of pride here in our district. When we talk about, when our superintendent talks about preparing our students for careers that don't yet exist, I think about exchanging ideas with my colleagues at the Gates Foundation who are thinking about some of these very challenges. And I say we need to, in our district, exchange ideas so that we can prepare our kids and create the most innovative curriculums that we possibly can. I've delved into the education budget with the Children's Defense Fund and want to think about how we can maximize the dollars that we have. And I've sat down with leading education researchers from around the country to figure out how do we measure what's hard to measure and make sure that we do best for our kids. This is my life's work. This is the kind of work, the kind of thinking and understanding and expertise that I would like to bring to our school district. We have an incredible moment right now where we've got an opportunity for change. We have an opportunity through the Common Core, through our new superintendent, to make sure that we can move forward as a truly unified school district in a collaborative way. Collaboration is something that has been the hallmark of my work, and that is what I'd like to bring to our school district as well. So we can work with Foothill, with Stanford, with the business community, the nonprofit community, artists, bring that love of learning and engagement in learning to our kids through innovative curriculum, a focus on middle schools, and a new foreign language emphasis in 6th grade and elementary school, improved writing instruction for all of our kids. Thank you, and I hope for your vote in November.
Thank you. We've now heard from all 5 candidates, and I think we all deserve a great round of applause. And before we close, I just want to say, I can't vote, but I vote for all 5 of you. We've got a great team up here. I'd like to now turn the program back to Ellen for closing comments.
Well, this has been a very enlightening and informative evening, and there are many people to thank. I want to start with Doria Chun-Hu, our moderator. Thanks to all our thanks to all our candidates who have participated in a lively discussion that will help us make our voter decisions. Special thanks to, I'm looking for, Trina Lovercheck. Thank you, Trina, for being our voter service chair and doing such a splendid job. And thanks to our timekeeper, Larry Lovercheck. Thanks to our question sorters. Our question sorters tonight were Mary Alice Thornton and Susan Usman, and our greeters collectors were Nancy Peterson, Jean McDonald, Miriam Sedman, and Amanda Afron. And finally, to all the other volunteers who made this evening possible, and thanks to you all for coming out tonight. Good night.